America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, October 30th, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Brian Merchant, tech columnist at the Los Angeles Times, author of Blood in the Machine, The Origins of the Rebellion Against Big Tech. Also on the program today, Israel's ground forces go deeper into northern Gaza as 2 million plus Palestinians are stuck in a terrorized blackout. U.S. calls for civilian protections as it refuses to publicly call for Israel to cease fire. Israeli hostage families demand Netanyahu prioritize hostage safety over killing Palestinian civilians.
No can do.
Small.
Sorry.
House Republicans announce a standalone Israel aid bill will get a vote on Thursday as Mitch McConnell fumes in the Senate. Stellantis and just breaking GM reached tentative deals with the UAW in what is looked like a historic union win. Bigger than historic. Super historic. Mike Pence no longer hanging with the Republican hopefuls, yeah. Came up with that all myself. Donald Trump with a commanding lead in Iowa as arguments being offered in Colorado as to legal arguments, we should say, whether he should be kicked off the ballot. George Santos pleads not guilty to 10 charges, but House may end up expelling him nevertheless. And the EPA fashioning a rule requiring utilities to actively replace lead drinking pipes, not just notify, but to replace. We shall see. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. It is another Monday, and obviously we spent the weekend. Emma Vigland, welcome. Monday fun day-ish.
Oh man, yes.
My weekends are now measured based upon how many fights did I manage to avoid getting into this weekend about Israel and Gaza.
I did not succeed on that front, I'll say. But I'm trying. I went to the rally. I went to a ceasefire rally, which was wonderful. So amazing to see so many people come out in Brooklyn, started from the Brooklyn Museum, headed to the bridge. I kind of dipped out before the bridge crossing. But it's a beautiful thing to be around like-minded people like that, and just to see how global some of these demonstrations are going, and how many, Jewish Voice for Peace activists are there as well. And they had just done that incredible Grand Central demonstration the night before. So I was very moved to see so many people out in Brooklyn.
Yeah, it does seem like at least in certain quarters that you're seeing protests, you're seeing people come out. Here is a clip of This is from, I guess,
Friday.
Friday. Shoot, I didn't have it. It's number 6. This is in Grand Central Station, and we have 2 clips. The first are demonstrators in support of a ceasefire. You can hear that now. We'll listen to this. This is pretty impressive. I mean, that place is full. And then this is a clip of Rosalind Paczewski, Hunter College professor, and discussing why she is protesting.
Palestinians have been the victims of oppression for 75 years, and it has to stop. That's why we're here, to say not in our name. I am older than the state of Israel.
There's Jewish prayers in the background. The sun is going down, and it's the Jewish Sabbath.
It is. And on Shabbat, we have to pray. We have to recommit ourselves to justice. I believe that Judaism and Jewish ethics, this is how I grew up thinking, are about justice and about Rabbi Hillel's statement, if I am not for myself, who am I? And if I'm only for me, what am I doing here? I glossed over it a little bit. And if not now, when? Now. Peace now. Ceasefire now. President Biden and Blinken, listen to what people are telling you, especially the young people and lots of Jews.
Not in our name is what they're chanting there. It really is amazing. And these are the biggest peace demonstrations definitely in the U.S. since the Iraq War.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. And, people will ask, well, we didn't see certain groundswells, even for, like, say, the Ukrainian people, for example. But the nature of protests is that you protest what your government is doing. And I think what some people miss is that this is actively being funded and perpetrated by the United States government, and that's what is so outrageous to so many people, is that and for the Jews there, I don't want to speak for them, but they're saying not in our name. Don't commit these atrocities in our name, using our grief to commit what 800 international scholars are calling crimes of genocide at this point, at the very least mass murder. And then from the American perspective, these are where our tax dollars are going. That's where our tax dollars are going. And I think that is really at the core of this here. A child in Gaza right now is dying every 10 minutes? Or am I undercounting that there? Either way, it's 3,500 children that we know of dead already.
Yeah, and it's hard to imagine that the numbers that we're getting aren't undercounts, frankly.
Yeah.
The ridiculousness that the Biden administration is claiming that they can't trust numbers generated by the Hamas-led government is absurd. They've never had that disposition before. And again, to the extent that there's any type of confirmation, Ryan Grimm was on the program Friday, and I think he also did a podcast released after that show, where he has a direct contact with someone with family or presence in Gaza, who had a list of 40 some odd family members who had been killed, and it matched up with the list that the House of Ministry, Health and Ministry had put out, I guess, on Thursday. And so, to the extent that there's any way to verify these things, but if the Israeli and American government really wanted more verification, they could send people in to count. Now, of course, those people would be in mortal danger because we know already that UN aid workers have been killed. Journalists, at least a dozen now, I think we're up to, have been killed. So they won't do that. And it is hard to look at the sort of the rubble in Gaza and say they've found every dead person. It's absurd. It really is absurd.
Yeah. And ceasefire, I mean, the idea that it still is so few members of the Democratic Party calling for it, it's absolutely insane to me. But the demonstrations are working. I mean, I do feel that there is movement on this. It's not fast enough. Many more people will die before anything changes. But if you take your foot up off the gas now, that this will be able to continue. And like, I love the idea too. What you're saying, Sam, is you could let people in to independently verify these things, but they don't want to. They don't want any information coming out. That's why there was the internet blackout, which is a practice that the United States has had historically condemned when done in other atrocities internationally. They let it go on for 36 hours until supposedly Biden pressured the government to restore internet access.
And to be honest, I haven't seen necessarily independent verification that internet access has been restored. And, you know, it's one thing to restore internet access, but if there is if there's no power and there's no safe place from the bombing, and we know that everywhere in northern Gaza is just being literally like razed to the ground. But we also know by the admission of Israeli officials that the south is being bombed as well. And
there's violence in the West Bank too.
And we're not even talking about what's going on in the West Bank. There were calls that went out last night. Did we get a follow up on that area? I don't know if we did. There was a village that apparently was like on the brink of suffering a pogrom in the West Bank. That, according to the Israeli B'Tselem, the Israeli peace organization. But we also know there have been dozens, not now close to 100 Palestinians killed in the past couple of weeks in the West Bank. Which incidentally, of course, there's no Hamas there. So.
Okay. So media, stop calling this the Israel-Hamas war. I'm sick of this at this point. This is an indiscriminate bombing campaign on a largely civilian population. They understand they're killing civilians. They're doing so on purpose. Netanyahu is going out publicly and calling this Palestinians with the Amalek, invoking these biblical tropes.
We'll play that
we
video
will later, but
yeah.
Just let's go, people. Let's catch up to what's actually happening and listen to Jewish Voice for Peace.
Good to see those. Good to see those protesters. And, you know, keep at it. Got a couple of words from our sponsors. Always sort of awkward to although I will say it's the only thing that's keeping me sort of like standing right now. Mm-hmm. Emma has a full bag of cashews. You want to show those?
I do.
From nuts.com.
Look at that. I've been needing cashews and just have been lazy to pick them up, but now we have a new sponsor that's going to keep me stocked.
And that's the thing. Nuts.com is more or less like, you know, walking into like Willy Wonka's candy factory. Nuts.com not only has tons of nuts, obviously, it's in their name. I've got a mixed bag of nuts over there and some almonds. And some of those like maple glazed walnuts.
The glazed ones, the sweet stuff's going to get you.
Very concerned about that.
Yes.
But they also have tons of candies like butterscotch and sort of like classic ones, fudge, licorice. They also have a ton of stuff like powders that you would put into your protein shakes. They've got stuff for cooking and baking. They've got dried fruit. It is nuts.com is basically a one-stop shop for any of those things in your pantry. Snacks for the kids, snacks for your office. This is a bulk situation too. You can get stuff. So if you maybe have a small restaurant or like a juice bar or something like that. They have specialty flours. It's really, I was going to say nuts, but it's nuts.com.
It's really nuts.com.
Also, you should know nuts.com, quality is top priority. They roast their nuts, they pop their corn in the same day that it ships. So when it reaches you, it's deliciously fresh. Satisfaction's guaranteed. We've got examples of it, right? We've been eating it all morning, frankly. There's just so many things on there. And all the nuts, I'm trying to do mostly like raw nuts now.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically my big thing. Because it's incredibly healthy for you. And the beauty about raw nuts is you don't eat them as much.
Right. It's there for the sustenance.
Yep. But they have, nuts.com has gluten-free options. They've got organic choices. They've got other diet-friendly products. Doesn't matter if you're looking for something sweet or something savory, or you need to stock up on everyday cooking essentials. Nuts.com is where you're going to find it. You can shop a la carte, or you can get free auto deliveries. So you never run out. Very helpful if your kids are eating that kind of stuff and they're rating Mila came home last weekend and all of a sudden all of the snacks I had bought for Saul, gone. Like literally just gone. Every single thing in the house. Right now, nuts.com is offering new customers a free gift with a purchase and free shipping on orders of $29 or more at nuts.com/majority. Check it out. All the delicious options, nuts.com/majority. You'll get a free gift and you'll get free shipping when you spend $29 or more. Link is in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Also, holidays are coming up. And that doesn't, if you got a business or if you're sending out a bunch of cards, stamps.com should be on your wish list, as it were. Why? Because stamps.com is your own personal post office. Doesn't matter where you are. All you need with stamps.com is a computer and a printer. They'll even send you a free scale, so you'll have everything you need to get started. You're sending stuff to your grandkids across the country. You send them to your grandparents across the country. Doesn't matter. And if you got a business that's going to be starting to move product this time of year, stamps.com is going to make it much easier for you. If you need a package pickup, you can schedule it through your stamps.com dashboard. If you sell products online, stamps.com seamlessly connects with every major marketplace and shopping cart. Plus, they have premium discounts. So you can order shipping and mailing supplies, labels, even printers from the stamps.com supply store. And then you get huge carrier discounts up to 84% with UPS or the U.S. Postal Service. So you're saving money. And stamps.com on the dashboard will tell you the least expensive way to send it. USPS, UPS, they calculate the rates and boom, you're set up. Stamps.com has been around for 25 years. They've been indispensable for over 1 million businesses. Back in the day when we were shipping out DVDs, yeah, actually this show has been around long enough that we were shipping DVDs when you signed up. It was stamps.com that's basically saved me. And Mila, she stuffed them into the envelopes. But I had these massive things I was taking down to the post office. And then I was like, oh, I don't need to do that anymore.
Do it from home.
Yep. That's what makes it really easy. And it doesn't matter if you wanted to post out, print out postage at 2 a.m. If you're a night owl, stamps.com. Doesn't matter. 24/7. 365. Give your business the gift of stamps.com so your mailing and shipping is covered for the holiday season. Sign up with the promo code Majority Report for a special offer. It includes a 4-week trial, free postage, and a digital scale. There is no long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, enter the code Majority Report. And lastly, you guys know this. I've been mentioning this. One of the things I'm trying to do, obviously we need public policy for this type of stuff, but It helps, and it certainly makes me feel better to try and cut down on the amount of plastic that I am buying and throwing out, essentially, even if I'm recycling it. And one of the ways that I have done that is gotten like all sorts of type of refillable containers, and less I am having to rely on buying like the big plastic containers of like cleaning fluids. Most cleaning formulas are 90% water anyways. And then you get them in these massive things, particularly like laundry detergent. It's nuts. So the shipping associated with having to ship those big things, and just the hassle from bringing it from the supermarket and then having it in your apartment, it's taking up half the apartment, and then having it end up in the ocean or wherever these plastics end up going. It's just a messed up system. Totally lose-lose. Well, Blue Land is on a mission to eliminate single-use plastic by reinventing cleaning essentials to be better for you and the planet. This is, it's a simple idea, right? Just endlessly refillable cleaning products with a good-looking design that looks great on your counter. You just fill your bottles with water. You drop in tablets, tiny tablets. Wait for them to dissolve. That means like all sorts of cleaning supplies you're not going to have to get on your grocery run. Refills start at just $2.25. You can even set up a subscription, which is what I do because I can't remember to do anything, or you buy in bulk for additional savings. They got cleaning sprays, they got hand soaps, they got toilet bowl cleaner. And the big thing for me is the laundry tablets. All Blue Land products are made with clean ingredients you can feel good about. This is where we're all headed. You got to cut down on all those big plastics. Completely unnecessary. You're probably using too much of that laundry detergent anyways. Mm-hmm. But this is, if you live in an apartment, you're brain dead if you don't do this. But if you care about also all the plastic you're doing, you should do it anywhere. Blue Land has a special offer for our listeners right now. You get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/majority. Check this out. You don't want to miss it. Blueland.com/majority for 15% off. That's blueland.com/majority. Get 15% off. We'll put a link in the podcast and YouTube description. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Brian Merchant, tech columnist at the LA Times, author of Blood in the Machine, The Origins of Rebellion Against Big Tech. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Want to welcome to the program Brian Merchant. He is the tech columnist at the Los Angeles Times and author of Blood in the Machine, The Origins of the Rebellion Against Big Tech. Brian, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
So for a long time, I think, and certainly because I'm old enough to have been like sort of one of those generations that was not native computer. There was a lot of adoption of technology, basically since I was starting in college. Computers and just like all sorts of gizmos and cable television, and even like non-clickable remote controls, and the term Luddite got thrown around a lot as somebody who just like was afraid of technology. I subsequently learned that wasn't the case, but your book really lays it out. just broadly, let's just start with that. What does being a Luddite actually mean?
Yeah, it's a big mischaracterization, and it's lasted decades and decades. So certainly, no one should feel bad about getting the term wrong. It's like the default now. But a Luddite is not anti-technology. The original Luddites were, a lot of them were technologists themselves, right? They were technicians. They knew exactly how the technology of the day worked. They had their hands on it. They were hackers, you could even argue, in their day. But what they protested was the way that it was being used by bosses against them. So the way that it was being used to sort of exploit them or to degrade wages or specifically to take their jobs or to move their jobs into factories against their will. So a Luddite is somebody who protests an exploitative use of technology, often, very justifiably so.
Do you and I want to get? I mean, you've written an excellent history of the genesis of this and how how that battle was waged at the time. I want to get into that, but do you think? And maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but do you think that the reason that it was not a mistake that we misinterpret the term Luddite, that the sort of the class issue associated with it, the exploitation associated with it, had been drained from the popular understanding of what that word meant, and it just became some old fuddy-duddy who was just afraid to change his or her ways?
Yeah, no, 100%. You could even go as far as to say it was a propaganda effort by the crown and by sort of the elites of the day to very intentionally paint Luddites in this way. And the victors write the history books, so they the crown sort of, and we'll talk about all this, I'm sure, but they raised troops, tens of thousands of troops. They occupied the districts where the Luddites were rebelling, and they put them down by force. And all this was accompanied by this sort of PR campaign where the crown was issuing proclamations saying, oh, these deluded men, they know not what they do. They're probably under the influence of some malign force. And, they were really painting them as backwards looking and dumb from the get-go. And if you think about, who that benefits, if you're somebody who might protest the way technology is being used to sort of slash your wages to profit somebody else, then it's really, really convenient to have a word in your pocket, to have a term in your pocket. Oh, he's just a Luddite, that you can write them off and dismiss those complaints, dismiss those real concerns with what's happening, and sort of dismiss them. And that's basically been the case ever since for 200 years. The elite class has had this very handy way of dismissing anybody who protests a potentially exploitative use of technology or a system of control that is being used against them. And they can trot out the term Luddite, and it's worked for decades and decades.
And so the story, your story, basically starts in the early 19th century, as we're starting to see these new technologies rolled out. At the time, obviously, these new technologies really had more to do with sort of the manufacture of textiles more than anything else. But set the stage for us.
Yeah, so you could kind of consider this to be the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. So we're not quite yet at the stage where you have the classic sort of portrait of the cities choked with smog and just lined with factories. And we're sort of at the early stages where that is taking shape. So in the 1700s, you have a series of machines that are invented with the explicit purpose of sort of saving labor or doing the work that somebody might do, or at least automating it, as we would call it today. That term didn't exist then. They would call it mechanization. But things like the spinning jenny, the water frame, things that are producing yarn, things that are producing knit goods, things that are producing woven goods, things all to do with cloth production, basically. And then after sort of the laissez-faire movement, and Adam Smith comes along and kind of makes an explicit case for why you should divide labor, and into sort of a system that would become the factory system, a lot of entrepreneurs and sort of industrialists of the day sort of take this as a starting pistol, as a firing gun, to really start relentlessly kind of organizing work into a factory system, where before, for hundreds of years, you still had the machinery and you still were working with machinery, but you would do it in your home or in a workshop if you were a cloth worker. And cloth workers were the biggest industrial worker base of the entire nation. It was cloth workers, textile workers, and agricultural workers. That was pretty much the base of Britain's major workforce. And they were working in the domestic system, and you had a pretty decent life, right? So if you were working in the cottage at home, the term cottage industry comes from this period because it was pretty nice. You're working with your family. You can sing songs. You're working with your friends. You can take a break when you want to. You can stroll in your garden. You're not, at the whims of somebody else. So at the turn of the century we start to see an accelerated drive in the early 1800s. We start to see this push by entrepreneurs and sort of factory owners and people sort of interested in making a lot of money in kind of tearing up this old set of social contracts that used to govern life, used to sort of make a community tick, in favor of moving a bunch of jobs into one factory where they had control, where they could amass all these machines, some of which had kind of been around, some which were new, but the biggest thing was the way that they were being put to use. And that was to sort of automate this work. And instead of getting skilled workers, they would really try to get, child laborers or unskilled workers, migrant workers, vulnerable workers to sort of do the work. So you still needed people to run the machines, but it was a way to cut the cost of the labor by sort of getting somebody who wasn't skilled, who hadn't trained in the trade, who would churn out an inferior product, but you could make more of them. So yeah, the Luddites. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, before we get into Luddites, I'm just curious. Yeah. How much of that so-called entrepreneurship pressured is the wrong word, but fed by the growing sort of like slave trade in the U.S. and the increase in production in cotton that starts, around 1800, the late 1700s, through the next 5 or 6 decades, because you're going from something like, I can't remember, a couple 100,000, bales of cotton a year to like millions of bales a year over the course of those decades. So as that like sort of picking capacity comes, because we're getting more and more slaves in this country, the cotton gets picked, it gets financed from up north in this country, and then shipped to for essentially to be produced in Britain.
Yeah. So the two trends are just intensely and deeply related. They are happening at the same time, and in fact, I dedicate a chapter in the book to sort of the automation of the cotton production trade, and I call it one of the great sort of original sins of automation, and one of the greatest sort of technological unintended consequences in all of history, this side of the atomic bomb, probably, because when Eli Whitney was building the cotton gin, he at least outwardly was saying, when I build this device that's going to automate sort of the process of basically cleaning cotton and preparing it for export, that required a lot of slave labor. And he believed that, if we automate this process, then we can get rid of all those jobs, and it'll probably be a great boon to the project of abolishing slavery. So that's one reason you should back this up. It's not what happened at all, of course. Like, actually, at that point, when he's developing this machine, the institution of slavery was kind of at a vulnerable point. There was a strong abolition movement, and and sort of the case for relying on slavery was waning. But he invents this machine, starts trotting it out to the southern cotton producers, and what happens? It just blows up the demand for cotton, because now it can speed the process by which it's cleaned. So you need a lot more input, and all of a sudden it just the demand for more enslaved people explodes, because you have to have more people picking the cotton. So basically it gives slavery a new lease on life for another 50 years at that point. And the plantation owners are actually taking cues from the British factory system that had been imported first from England and then into the West Indies, and then we see it arrive in the United States, where they're really dividing labor in a much more intense way, and they have the overseers really ratchet up the amount of sort of contact that they have with the enslaved people, really driving them much harder. We see this transition to a system where it was still awful. The slavery was always awful, but the enslaved people were expected to sort of pick and produce cotton on their own terms. And then you see the gang system of slavery, where it's really sort of organized like a factory. And then this huge surplus of cotton then is exported back to England, where boom, they have a huge surplus of raw materials that now they need more people and more machinery to produce. So that in turn feeds sort of the rise of especially the Manchester cotton industry, where they have to sort of there's a big opportunity, quote unquote, to sort of produce more cotton goods. So they really start seeing mechanization ramp up there.
I'm just gonna. I wonder if we ever have seen an increase, an introduction of technology where it supposedly will eliminate certain bad elements, whatever, within the production chain. But in fact, what they always do, it seems to me, is just increase productivity in whatever is the easiest way possible. And that invariably means we keep that bad thing and maybe often like multiply it. I mean, we could see it from everything, faxes, when faxes were introduced, like, this is going to save, you time at work. But in fact, that time just ends up getting gobbled up. It always seems to be that dynamic.
Yep. Since day one, this is the story of automation. It promises the elimination of the human element, and it promises a streamlined, sleek sort of production system that's going to be great, because we're going to eliminate these repetitive, dirty, dangerous jobs that people have to do, and it'll be great. We'll replace it. Almost never is that the case. There are always not only unintended consequences, but the employer or the boss who's instituting these. 9 times out of 10, this is being instituted by a company or a corporation whose primary drive is to maximize profits. So he's not going to let any of those productivity gains go back to the worker. He's going to capture them all himself. I mean, even John Maynard Keynes, like the most famous and influential economist of the last 100 years, he thought that the way that the trajectories were pointing of automation and technological productivity, he thought by the time the 21st century rolled around, that humans would be working a 10-hour work week, if they wanted to. Because he saw how productive machinery was, and he saw, just the potential there. But of course, that's not what happened. Of course, the owners captured all those gains, profited mightily off of them, and just ratcheted up the amount of work that most people had to do. This has been the case since the first factories made by the grandfather of the factory, Richard Arkwright, who I talk about in the book. I kind of call him the first tech titan. It's a loose term, but I think it works. And he was basically using children to produce yarn with his automated water frame. And instead of, lessening the burden on the previous population that was making yarn, it's this far more laborious and dangerous work regimen. That's, because he just keeps ratcheting up the amount of productivity that he expects to see. And you can draw a clear line all the way through today with Amazon, with all of these productivity gains that they hope to get by having this intense sort of, it's almost this worker surveillance software where they kind of gamify the workplace, and you have to, they basically treat you, the worker, like a robot, where you have to hit X number of productivity goals and you get points for doing this or that, or you lose them if you take too long going to the bathroom. So there's always, new regimens that are promising to sort of, bring some great benefit through technology. And almost always, if the worker is not involved in the process of how that technology is developed or deployed, if they have no say in how it's actually going to be used in their workplaces and in their lives, then it will be used essentially against them, and they will have to fight to claw back those gains. Sorry.
It seems like that is the concern really with AI right now, right? I mean, you can copy and paste this historical conversation into the current context where like 95% of the articles I see about artificial intelligence are either it's being promoted by somebody who is a Google executive when you click on the bio, or it's about we really need to be worried about how artificial intelligence could take over the world and become smarter than humans, like as if it's a sci-fi book, versus the very practical realities that you are engaging in, which is the anti-worker element, and that's largely glossed over unless you're reading some sort of leftist publication.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah, that's exactly what I think that their intent is to move the goalpost so far down that they want us worrying about whether or not it's going to become Skynet and not the more mundane things that it's built to do, which is basically workplace automation. That's what they're trying to get it to do. I mean, if you look at, so all these companies in the last few months have just ratcheted up this huge valuation. They're getting more and more money from Amazon, from Google, from Microsoft. They're all investing in these AI companies or starting their own. And the only way that they can really ever hope to sort of turn a profit, it's not going to be through some guy messing around and making a few images every week on Dolly or something. No, they're going to have to sell this to enterprises, to companies. They're going to have to sell enterprise tier software that promises some degree of labor savings, of automation. So while they're talking about, we don't want AI to become sentient and murder us all on the world stage, they're going around and talking to medium-sized small businesses, tech companies going, hey, our Copilot system could probably automate 1/3 of your software staff right now, your software development team. And they're doing that over and over and over across the country. And they're making this promise. It's not always true. It's not like that the AI is ready to be unleashed and to just take the jobs, but that's the case that they're making. They're basically making the case that they can, cut your head count in your staff. They can automate jobs. They can save you money through software automation. And that's going to be the pitch. It's going on mostly behind closed doors right now. But you talk to an illustrator, a copywriter, someone who does freelance work, they're on the front lines of this. They'll say already they've seen the amount of work that their clients are asking them to do has already diminished. Say if they're an illustrator and they used to work with a big company that made their ad decks with an artist, now they can use Midjourney. And especially if it's not public facing, where they're not going to get called out on it, that's where a lot of this stuff is already turning.
I think that's what I appreciate about the looking back to the origins of the rollout of this, because it makes it really clear. It's clear in that moment, it seems to me, that this is the enterprise that is rolling this thing out, whatever it is. The guy who's trying to produce clothes at the turn of the century. There is a political decision that is being made. It is, how are we going to deploy our resources within the context of this enterprise? And when this new element comes in, are all the people involved in the enterprise going to share in the benefits of that new element? That new element being the machine, and invariably, you can see it right here. Why people talk about the need for democratizing the workplace is because you have one person or one entity or one potential benefactor of the multiple benefactors associated with that: the community, the workers, the customer, and the owners, and then maybe subsequently shareholders. And invariably, it goes to the owner and the shareholder, period. End of story. Much and is often leveraged to take more away from the customer, more away from the community, and more away from the worker, not just even leave them at status quo. But let's talk about George Miller, since we're back there. Who was that guy, and what did he do?
Yeah, George Miller was a young man in his early 20s who had just finished the 7 years of apprenticeship that you had to undertake to become part of the cloth trade, which it's important to say. It's like, so these are, difficult and skilled trades to learn, but these are also kind of like controls that are on the industry to make sure that, it's somewhat regulated. And he emerges from those 7 years. He also did a stint, fighting the war there's a decades-long war that was going on, and he's a veteran of the war against Napoleon. And he kind of comes of age just at this moment where all of these entrepreneurs and industrialists are really kind of hitting the gas on factorization, on automation, on using machines to sort of clumsily do the work that he's done, and he's sort of built his entire life around, or the expectation of his life. He's such a young man, and he is also he's very charismatic. He's well liked in town, and he also has a pulse on what's going on in the community, and what he sees really alarms him and depresses him and sort of enrages him, because he sees sort of very clearly the way that things are going, and that's the factory owners are setting up shop outside of town, and they're concentrating labor, they're concentrating profits at the direct expense of people, down the street. And to your point, that's one reason that I was so drawn to this example, is because it does sort of really it renders things in a pretty stark light. It's pretty, we don't have globalization. You don't have these sort of super diverse economies. A lot of these cloth districts had towns where that was the good work in the town. You went to work as a cloth dresser or a finisher or a weaver. You learned the trade. And, of course, there were other trades that were associated, but that was the heart of the trade. You couldn't really change job. It's not like, things today get a little bit muddied up where it's like, if something, if you're a taxi driver and you've spent 50 years, learning the streets of New York, and along comes Uber, people say like, oh, well, why don't you just go get another job? This, I feel like kind of clarifies just what is going on throughout all those sort of like webs of globalization and sort of the murk that is cast over the economy today, because you don't have another choice in those days. You see the factory that's taking all the jobs. It's right down the street. You see your friends who now cannot feed their families. And to them, this is an immoral choice. It is not complicated. They said they're stealing our bread, because they're building a machine, and the point is to make money at the expense of somebody else. And it was not, it was not like, well, they're innovating, so, what are you going to, no, we could have figured out a way to balance this, but instead somebody made the decision to hit the gas to accelerate the rate that they were making profits at the expense of somebody else. So this is what Mellor says, right? He says, if we don't put a stop to this, the tendency's all one way, and pretty soon there's going to be nobody left in this country except these elite few people, and everybody else, kind of scrambling for scraps. So he becomes one of the leading Luddite figures, and we can talk about the genesis and the movement of all that. But he fights back, basically. I just wanted to make this one note too about because of the sort of starkness of this example. The one thing that occurred to me too was that you also at that time did not have the excuse of like, well, a company has a fiduciary responsibility to maximize the profit for their shareholders. So what else are they going to do? Like it
it shows that, in fact, we probably have statutes that say that now so that people can't say you have a choice. And like those, they're there to have basically taken the idea that we have a choice with these things.
Yeah.
And just in the way that a government is really just our economy is political. We decide how we're going to redistribute value in our society every day. That's all that's going on. It's just a series of decisions as to who's going to be the winner, who's going to be the loser, and everything else is just sort of like built to obfuscate those series of choices. And when you go back and look at the corporation, the businesses at that time, you realize these are just choices. And, people who are participating on Meller's side are saying like, that's a bad choice for us. And there is no laws that say you have to do it this way or that way. That will come later, so that obscures the fact that these choices are being made. And it's because it's a private industry. It's even that less democratic, although, we still had a ways to go in terms of democracy at that time. I mean, we still do, but now, but yes, talk about the genesis of the Luddites and Ned Ludd, as it were.
Yeah. And just a quick point there too, 100% that there are a series of choices. And I would just underline that extends to the technology too. How we build technology, how we position it, who we decide benefits and profits from it. Those are all choices, human choices made by these people too. So it's not like it's a separate realm where we have this like bottled lightning and we have to figure out, we choose every step of the way how we build that stuff and how we want it to sort of factor into society. And that is what the Luddites were protesting against, because they saw the machinery that was being used to sort of just exacerbate inequality, to kind of lead to suffering of some at the benefit of a few. And they said, we are not, again, even in the day, they were not against all machinery or even the specific machinery. They were just against how it was used. And they said, we are against the machinery that's hurtful to commonality. And that quote really has stuck with me because, it's a pretty good barometer to gauge, whether a technology is going to be something that's going to either cause protest or is going to be good for people at large. Is it hurtful to commonality? And if it, and they found a number of machinery that they felt was, and that was the machinery that they ended up smashing. And the way that they smashed it is this. So in 1811, all the stuff we've been talking about today comes to a head. It's the technology has reached a point where a lot of the entrepreneurs are interested in really sort of organizing it in their factories and sort of really sort of hitting the gas on deploying it. But there's also this big trade depression, because there's a war going on with France, and it was one of the very first sort of trade sanctions imposed by a government. The British Crown puts a trade sanction on and England cannot do business with anybody that's an ally of France. So that cuts off some of its biggest export markets. So all the cloth districts are immediately hurt. Meanwhile, they're still being taxed for the wars. Everybody who, all the workers and people who pay taxes are being taxed for these endless wars. And there's a bad trade harvest. There's a bad crop harvest. So you have these three kind of things all sort of converge. And what do the industrialists and entrepreneurs do when they see the trade at a point of weakness? Well, they say now's a perfect time to just do even more automation. And they really start accelerating it, trying to throw people out of work when they're already suffering. And at this point, it's just more than a lot of the cloth workers can take. And I should also point out that they've spent the last 10 years lobbying Parliament, saying, look, we need a minimum wage. We need some protections. Can you at least uphold the regulations that are on the book that all these entrepreneurs are tearing up? You can imagine Uber coming into the city and saying, oh, we're not a taxi company, we're a software company, so we don't have to play by the rules. Same story 200 years ago. They said, oh, well, we don't need to follow the apprentice rules. We don't need to follow the cloth count rules. We're using technology. The game has changed. And so it falls on deaf ears in Parliament, who just wave all that away and eventually just tear up all the regulations on the books in 1809. So 1811, backs against the wall, the cloth workers turn to this tactic of last resort, and that is machine breaking. And it's not this crude, dumb, like, oh, machine, I hate it, I smash it. No, it is this tactical, this strategic sort of mode of resistance where they spent months and months preparing for this. And what they would do is they start writing letters to the most offensive factory owners in town saying, we know you've got 100 of the obnoxious machines in your factory, or however many. And if you don't take them down, you'll get a visit from Ned Ludd's army. And if the factory owner took them down, they'd be fine. But if they didn't, then the Ned Ludd's army would in fact show up under the cover of night. Either they'd slip through the windows, or they'd hold the overseer up at gunpoint, and they'd go in and they'd break just the machines that were being used to automate and degrade their work. They'd leave all the other machines in place, they'd smash them, and they would say, if you try to bring them back, we'll return and we'll do the whole place. But if they didn't, then they would be fine. Then they would leave. And this sort of tactic, all these letters would be signed by General Ludd or Ned Ludd and King Ludd even. But Ned Ludd was this fictitious person. He was said to be an apprentice cloth worker, a kid who was overworked by his master and who didn't want to spend every day toiling at his master's command. So he just kind of slacked off, and his master went to the magistrate and had him whipped. He got mad, he smashed the machine, and he fled into Sherwood Forest, where he started building an army. It's probably an apocryphal story, and this is the same district. This was in Nottingham, I should add, from the land of Robin Hood. So there's this tradition of dissent, of rebellion, and Ned Ludd and Robin Hood, they sound very similar, so it's probably just made up to be this mythic figure. But all of these cloth workers start organizing under this banner, and it's this very distributed, decentralized movement, not unlike kind of Occupy or Black Lives Matter today, where you have an objective, you have a tactic, and you have sort of a belief system, and it can be emulated in all the cloth districts across England without any like sort of central organizing committee or anything. So these attacks start ramping up, and it's unclear exactly how connected they were. They probably talked a little bit, but by and large, it's this extremely grassroots movement. It's this extremely sort of but it is also very organized, and it's very ferocious, and it is also extremely popular, because the cloth workers are not the only ones who don't like the factory. They don't like inequality and all these things. So it becomes this huge popular movement where people are cheering the Luddites in the streets as they go about their machine breaking.
And we should say, just so that people get a sense of the book, you basically follow a bunch of different individuals and tell this story through the perspective of different individuals. But give us just a sense, jumping forward, like how does this era end, more or less? Or does it ever really? I mean, these issues are ongoing, but this particular era where there was like, what brings it to a close, at least that chapter of this dynamic?
Yeah. Well, so initially it's very successful. Some factory owners wave the white flag and have sympathized with the workers all along and have had to go along with it to sort of keep up with the with the most ambitious factory owners and so on and so forth. So they notch some victories, which really scares the crown, really scares the industrialist class. They don't like how popular everybody is. And we talked a little bit up front about this propaganda campaign that was paired with a military occupation. So the three things that really end up crushing the movement are that that military occupation, sort of they start sending just troops. Anywhere there's a Luddite disturbance or a Luddite movement, they just occupy the districts where cloth is made or where there may be targets. And it's actually pretty ineffective for a long time, but you still basically have like garrisoned towns in the middle of England. It's the largest domestic occupation in British history, at least to that point. So tens of thousands of troops, militiamen, mercenaries, and then the crown makes it a crime punishable by death just to break a machine in order to try to subdue the Luddites. Notably, as you said, there's other characters. One person I follow is Lord Byron, and he stands up and gives this big sort of vociferous opposition to this act to make it punishable by death to break a frame. He loses out, but he remains a Luddite supporter, probably the most famous one in the day. So it's a crime punishable by death to break a frame. You have occupied military districts, and eventually the Luddites kind of hit a wall, and when one of them goes too far and assassinates a factory owner, and they start to lose the popular sentiment too. But essentially, they are crushed. They're crushed by the state, and it's again one of the first times where you really see this alliance where it costs the state an immense amount of money and resources to deploy troops to put down the workers who are again fighting for their right to earn a living, to a right to make enough money to feed their families. And the state sides with the industrialists, sides with the tech titans, quote unquote. And those alliances are drawn, and they pretty much hold to this day. And the Luddites are hung and mass when they're finally discovered. There's a big battle that the Luddites lose, and it kind of, the movement is snuffed out by the power of the state, and the resistance and the ethos of Luddism lives on for years afterwards, and sort of sabotage and industrial sabotage is inaugurated as a tactic, and a lot of the strategies and the solidarity are really important in forming sort of the working class consciousness, and we can talk about any of those offshoots and that outgrowth, but yeah, they're crushed by the state, pointedly.
Maybe the best way to talk about those outgrowths is to, we should note that literally a couple hours ago it was announced that the UAW came to at least a tentative agreement with GM after announcing, I guess it was yesterday or over the weekend, or an agreement with Stellantis. This is on the heels of an agreement with Ford. And it seems like one of the most successful sort of like strikes, union demands in modern history. Maybe at least in the past 50 years, I think maybe for sure in the past 50 years, it seems. 25% pay increase is just sort of like the top line figure over the course of a 3 or 4, 5-year contract, depending on, all the details we're going to get a little bit more. But how much of that type of unionism in particular, one that is really sort of aggressive and more democratic. I mean, the UAW had a big sort of, they were under a consent decree that brought about this administration, Sean Fain, which, feels far more democratic, both in structure and processes, but also just in disposition. Like, he is much more in tune to the membership, it feels like, from the outside than we've seen in the past. How much of that is a sort of, I guess, a descendant of the Luddite movement?
Yeah, I mean, so when the Luddites were rising up, one of the reasons they had to rise up, I didn't mention, was that it was illegal to form a union. There were laws on the books called the Combination Acts. So if you, tried to collectively bargain and say, hey, we're all agreed on this, we won't work for this much less rate, you could be thrown in prison. So part of the outgrowth of the Luddite movement was the reform effort that was really spurred by some of the folks that I follow in the book. Gravener Henson, who was a Luddite himself, but also was interested in pulling the levers of reform, and he really fought to the bitter end, and with ultimately some success to get those Combination Acts repealed, and we saw sort of the beginnings of the union movement take rise. But there's a really, really good lesson from the Luddites in that, so being militant can work. You don't need to actually smash machines, but the industrialists and the sort of the elites of the day were terrified of the Luddites. A lot of them gave in and offered demands because they had power and they were popular. And we've seen, as you mentioned with Sean Fain and the previous sort of leadership of some of our unions had not wanted to mix it up too much. They had not wanted to push against the companies. It had gotten pretty slack. So I think seeing these sort of more, it's not militant, but it's a lot more confrontational. It's a lot more sort of they're leaning into their power a lot more. And I would also point out, one of the big things was that the companies were trying to say, like, well, we have new technologies, right? Where you're going to be working with batteries and electric cars, and that's not as hard to produce, so we need to pay you less. And one of the things the union did was stand up and say, absolutely not. This is still labor. This is still very labor intensive and skilled work. Just because it's a new technology does not give you the right to say that you should be paid less or take more work off the table. Same thing with the WGA. I would say that that's another modern example of a very successful Luddite tinged strike, because they saw the studios saying that, well, we want to be able to use AI to write scripts, and then you can, maybe we'll let you rewrite them for a lesser fee. And they drew a red line. And I argue, and I think I did argue in one of my columns, that that's Luddism in the modern day. You don't need a hammer. You just need to reject what is going to be an exploitative use of technology, because they knew the studios were not going to write a whole movie with AI. They were just going to write a blueprint, bring it to them and say, okay, well, you can get a rewrite fee for this, but we'll own the rights. You don't get residuals. You don't get all this. And it was mostly a way to try to break labor power, to try to degrade conditions. And they drew that red line in the WGA, and they said, no. They said, absolutely not. If somebody's going to use AI, we're going to have control over how it's going to be used. The studio can't do it. We'll make that decision. And kind of amazingly, they won that. They won that right to sort of control that part of the labor process. So that's a huge victory. And I think one that, is extremely inspiring, because we're going to see a wave of these fights coming down.
Do you think that the legacy of the Luddites, or the lessons that come out of there, are that tactic of militancy that they had, or was it did they represent a new way of understanding of the benefits / increase in productivity, and who gets a piece of that, who shares in that so-called benefit? If the sharing of that benefit goes to, all the parties, the constituencies involved in that factory or whatever it is, that production line, or just one narrow beneficiary, or is it both?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, but I think it's more the latter. I think it's saying it is, in fact, you should be encouraged to question how technology is going to be used in your workplace, in your life, in your daily routine. Who is a given technology going to serve? Is it going to serve you, the worker, or is it going to serve your boss at your expense? And it's giving, I think, people license, again, especially, this is really important in this era where for so long we've been taught that progress is equal to technology. It's Silicon Valley is the bringer of all of these, great technological gifts, and, to question or to resist them was unthinkable for so long. We've seen some of that change with the techlash and so forth, but there's still a lot of people who are very resistant to even say, well, wait a minute, this seems like an awfully raw deal. And we're seeing that, I think, thanks to the writers and to a number of the other sort of folks who are pushing back on this right now, we're seeing that facade start to crack, because the Luddites are exactly saying what you pointed out, Sam. It's asking if this technology is going to be used for the end of exploitation and giving license to refuse it, to oppose it, to draw a red line, and giving us more say over how we want technology to be used in our lives. Because so often, as you said at the top, it's being used by folks who are hoping to just profit off of it at our expense. It's that simple. If the control only goes to the VC class, to the tech titans of our day, to the managerial class, to people who are using technology for the express purpose of profit, then you can pretty well intuit the outcomes and who's gonna be affected by that. So I think the Luddites have given us a good example and an important example to look at the way that it's being deployed in society or even in our specific workplaces and to question it. And it's okay to question it. It's okay to be a Luddite. And in fact, there's great power in being a Luddite.
Brian Merchant, tech columnist at the Los Angeles Times, author of Blood in the Machine, The Origins of Rebellion Against Big Tech. Thanks so much for your time today. We'll put a link to that at majority.fm in our podcast and YouTube descriptions. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. Head into the fun half. Just a reminder, it's your support that keeps this show alive. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free half free of commercials, but you also get the fun half. And you get the ability of IMing the show in the fun half. And you allow this show to survive and thrive. You can also help us out by, passing our videos around. Posting us on Instagram. We post on Instagram or Facebook.
Yes.
If some of you folks are still on Facebook, pass us around on Facebook.
I'm trying increasingly. Like I have an Instagram account that I didn't use really much before this, and it's just like Twitter's such a cesspool. I'm trying to post on there as much as I can to get some of this Palestine stuff out because it's just like, where does it even go on Twitter at this point?
Yeah, it's I don't know if I want to get too deep involved in Instagram, but I know there's a lot of people there.
Yeah.
And Facebook, I missed that wave, but there's still a lot of people hanging out on Facebook. And if you're on Twitch, talk us up on Twitch.
Totally.
Use your subscribe, but always subscribe or hit the like button or get a hype train going.
Yeah.
Poggers
to the max, to the moon or whatever. Right?
JustCoffee.coop,
right.
Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. JustCoffee.coop. Emma, ESPN.
ESPN, yes, well.
Lost year for the Patriots.
I know.
God.
I know. I mean, look, Bill has lost his touch as a general manager, I will say that. But we will be speaking about the very crazy Week 8, the debut by Will Levis that shook up the NFL. Chiefs getting upset, their first ever road divisional loss in the Patrick Mahomes era, if you can believe it, against the Denver Broncos. It's time to switch to Sam Darnold. We'll talk about the World Series too, and then also this tragic incident where this American hockey player, Adam Johnson, died after getting cut by a skate in the neck, and it was a black player who did it, and now everyone is trying to, and by everyone I mean the right, is trying to go after this player. So youtube.com/ESPN show.
Jennifer from St. Louis also reminds us there's a Majority Report subreddit. Yes, in fact, we do know. Folks should check out the Discord and the subreddit. We get a lot of views comes from that our subreddit.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of views on YouTube from there. Matt is out, but folks can check out Left Reckoning. Do you have any details on it, Bradley? Well, you can follow
our
Matt.
panels are out of control, messed up now. I mean, like I'm becoming as
What do you mean?
OCD about this as you
Oh yeah.
Sorry, not to be ableist. It's just
You're becoming a little bit compulsive.
Compulsive, I should say that. Yes.
Right.
I don't like it. We'll have to fix this.
Yeah. No, that's weird. I don't know what's going on. We're gonna.
I'm so angry at Bradley.
Oh me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Disgusting.
Well, Matt and David were joined by Derek Davison of the Forward Exchange's newsletter and American Prestige podcast to talk about foreign policy in Israel-Gaza, and then also David spoke with I believe Kevin Sanchez of the San Antonio Current to discuss Texas and the immigration policy out in Texas. So youtube.com/Left Reckoning for that, and patreon.com/Left Reckoning to access the postgame.
All right, quick break. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We're back. Whoa, wow.
Okay, I'm fixing. I mean,
that was different than before.
I'm going to be real with you. You're the one. No. Only one of us needs.
No, just take it easy. I'm just going across this way. All right.
It's like an armed standoff.
I know,
Hey, whoa.
Only one
I was
of
just
us
centering
can move.
myself.
I'm
not moving. I'm moving laterally, not